Welcome to the deep dive for this week. Don't forget to visit the website at deepdiveau.net. Check out our socials and Patreon page at the Deep Dive AU. Subscribe via your favourite podcast app or like and subscribe at our YouTube page at the Deep Dive AU.
The Deep Dive podcast mugs are now available for purchase and are currently on sale. Just go to our merchandise page at deepdiveau.net to purchase one. Don't miss out on this opportunity to grab one for yourself or as a thoughtful gift for a fellow podcast enthusiast.
This is the Deep Dive Podcast. And here is your host, Michael Coles.
Kristy Haworth is an accredited dyslexia therapist and the founder of All Kids Can Education, a private practice dedicated to evidence-based structured literacy. With 20 years of experience in education, Kristy has committed her career to helping children overcome challenges with reading, writing, and spelling. Using the Orton-Gillingham and Multisensory structured language approaches, Kristy systematically delivers research-based teaching that helps children become confident and capable readers and writers. Her online programs and resources make high-quality literacy support accessible to families across the world. Kristy is passionate about making sure that kids don't fall through the cracks of the education system. She is focused on helping demystify literacy challenges for families and in doing so, puts kids on the path to literacy success. Kristy Haworth, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me here and making the time for me to speak. I'm excited.
Okay, so how do the brain structures and neural pathways of children with dyslexia differ from those of typical readers?
Okay, so I'm a dyslexia specialist. So the way that I view the brain and the way that I've come to understand different types of brains is that everyone's brain when we're born is wired differently. And so for kids with dyslexia, they're born with a brain that is not wired for sound. So, and when I say not wired for sound, that means like letter to sound correspondence. So they don't have that innate ability to be able to naturally pick up how our language is connected through sound and how those sounds are connected through letters. So what we need to do is teach those kids how the sounds and the letters are connected and how our speech is broken up into individual sounds. And then we can come in and wire their brains that way, even though they weren't really born to have it ready to go, so to speak.
Okay, so in what ways do differences in phonological processing in dyslexic learners affect their ability to read and spell?
Okay, so phonological processing is the ability to understand how speech sounds work. So it's an umbrella term, and underneath that we have phonemic awareness. So these are all pre-reading skills that kids need to have to be able to be successful and confident with reading and with writing, with spelling. And so when kids are born that have dyslexic brains, they have a weak phonological processing part of their brain. It's a core deficit, and so they don't naturally it sort of ties into the previous question where they don't have that readiness within their brain to be able to catch on to reading and spelling without specific instruction on how to do so. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It makes perfect sense. What evidence-based interventions have been shown to support reading and spelling skills in children with dyslexia?
Okay, so when we're looking at evidence-based practice, when we're teaching kids how to wire that symbol to sound and how to get our words and break them down into sounds, what we need to do is explicitly teach them how to do so. And we do that through a very structured, systematic, cumulative approach. So what that means is we go in and we teach the very first skill that they need to know. And then we go in and we teach the next skill, and we layer those skills systematically until we build up their knowledge of how our words work in terms of written language. We want to stay away from practices like the balanced literacy approach, which is really dominant within our school system, where teachers and myself included in the early days were taught how to teach kids how to read through using what we call the 3 cueing system, which means looking at the picture, making a guess, looking at the first letter of the word and making a guess, seeing if you can kind of match it up with the picture, and memorizing whole words. So that's the kind of thing that we need to stay away from, because that's not going to wire the brains of our dyslexic kids beautifully so that they can then be able to have success with their reading and spelling. So I practice an Orton-Gillingham approach to teaching reading and spelling, and also multisensory structured language, which is MSL. So they are the gold standard for dyslexic kids, and the reason why is because it's so systematic, and we teach one skill at a time, so it never overwhelms kids. We can always pare things back, which is a little bit different to other phonics programs. So that's why I love the Orton-Gillingham and the MSL approaches, because we're able to tailor it exactly to that child in a very systematic way.
Okay, so how can multisensory teaching methods, that means integrating visual, auditory, and kinesthetic improve literacy outcomes for dyslexic students?
Yes. So a part of the approach that we use to teach dyslexic kids is multisensory. That means that we want to, when we're teaching something, we want to have the 3 elements of their senses engaged at the same time. So visual, they need to be able to see it. Auditory, they need to be able to hear it. And kinesthetic, they need to be able to move it or see it move, or feel it. And so once we've got those 3 sensory inputs at the same time at that exact point of learning, our brain takes that information on much easier and it's able to stick. I think there's a saying, neurons that fire together wire together. And so that's the idea of what we're doing when we're teaching these specific skills. We want to optimize that teaching by creating an experience that's going to involve those 3 senses, so that we get maximum stick points with what we're teaching.
Okay, so what role does I can't pronounce the word, phonemic or something like that, phonomic awareness play in early reading instruction for children with dyslexia, and how can it be effectively cultivated in the classroom? Can't pronounce words today, I do apologise.
Yeah. Oh, it's not easy. So it's phonemic awareness. So phoneme means sound. So it really just means a sound awareness. So how important is it in the classroom? It's important because if 100% of kids, for an example, when I was teaching in the classroom, I would have every single year, this is going back quite a few years, I would have 4 to 5 kids that wouldn't learn how to read and spell. They wouldn't progress, and nothing that I was doing to help them, no matter how much time or more of the same that I was giving them, they never moved progressively, like they never did. And it got to a point where, as a teacher, it was just sort of like you accepted that. And I didn't accept it, which is why I moved on from the classroom, because I realized that I didn't have the skills to be able to teach those 4 or 5 kids in that classroom year after year after year. That counts. That's a lot of kids, right? And so phonemic awareness and to teach kids to read and spell through phonics is essential, because otherwise we're leaving those 4 or 5 kids in the classroom behind every time we skip through a year, every time. So it's absolutely vital.
Okay, so how does structured literacy, explicit systematic instruction align with what we know about the dyslexic brain's learning process?
Yeah. Well, so the dyslexic brain has a core phonological deficit within their ability for understanding, as we mentioned earlier, how sounds and letters work together. And so when we come at it from a structured approach, what that does is it's the opposite of overwhelming. It doesn't overwhelm kids. So what it does is it helps kids feel really successful, because when things are really structured, we're able to teach one minute part of the skill. And then once that's taught and mastered, we can teach the next one and then the next one. And so we're layering those skills, and that's how kids get skill set. And that's how they get confidence in understanding how our language works. So the structured part of teaching kids to read and spell is is not essential for every single kid. Like some kids that with that strong phonological awareness, they just seem to naturally have it wired in their brain. It won't really, matter to them. It doesn't hurt them either. It's going to be also beneficial for those kids, but it's essential for those kids that are struggling with reading and with spelling.
What are some innovative technological tools or software that can aid in teaching reading and spelling to dyslexic learners?
Yeah, I think we're really lucky these days because we have so many options in terms of what kind of technology we can use to help kids that have dyslexia or to help kids that are having a hard time with reading and spelling. So I guess a couple of things that come to mind is some accommodations and adjustments that we can put in place and teach kids how to use so they can access the curriculum, particularly in those upper years, is things like speech to text. So there's lots of different speech to text tools that we can use. And so that means that when the child speaks, the computer will create that into text. And so that's really good, particularly for those kids that might have dysgraphia, which is a difficulty with writing. And so they're able to get out all of their brilliant ideas down into text and then be able to structure it and do what they need to do from there. So that's a really good one. What else? We've got a little tool called the C Pen. And what the C Pen does is it's like a little handheld device. It looks a bit like a pen. And then you scroll over the text and then it reads the text out to you. So there's a few limitations with that. It has to be a certain size text and things like that. But that can also be a really good tool for dyslexic kids or kids that are struggling with decoding those unfamiliar words. There's heaps of apps out there. So a couple that come to mind, one is the Reading Doctor. It's a really good app that's developed by a speech pathologist and teaches kids letter to sound correspondence, how to blend sounds together, which is a phonemic awareness skill that we need to be able to decode, how to segment sounds. So that's, again, a phonemic awareness skill. It's a pre-spelling skill that we need. And there's other computer programs, like a really great one is Nessie, which is a subscription-based PC program, online program, and that is really good at systematically teaching kids through a very good structure of how to read and spell and supporting them that way. And there's so much more. And I think that now with AI coming out, I think that there's going to be a lot of different opportunities now for different products to come out to really assist our kids with dyslexia and dysgraphia. So that's exciting. There's a lot of cool stuff coming out.
Okay, so how can educators tailor lessons to address the unique learning profiles of dyslexic students based on their neural processing differences?
Yeah, okay, so this is a tough one because when I was in the classroom, I didn't have the training that I have now and the understanding of how I can help those kids. You remember the 4 or the 5 kids that were in that bottom group? I had no idea how to help them because I didn't have an understanding of how to teach kids the foundations, what the actual foundations were, and then how to systematically skill build from there. So if I was going to give some advice to a teacher that wanted to help a child that was in their grade that perhaps was struggling with reading or with spelling or both, it would be to go in and they need to address the foundations. So kids need to know and this sounds really basic, but every single child that comes through our practice here at All Kids Can has a mix-up or a confusion with the vowels. So they need to know that there's 5 vowels. Each vowel makes 2 sounds each, a long sound and a short sound. And then we need to make sure that we're wiring that correct sound to symbol. Because if kids are mixing up they see the letter I and they say the sound eh, or they see the letter E and they say the sound I, because E and I are really commonly confused with our kids. So we need to go in and correct those sorts of things so that we've got the foundations really, really solid. Like we know we can't build a house on sand. It's exactly the same with reading skills and reading development. So what we need to do is go in and make sure that they know those letter to sounds, go in and correct that for them and assist them with that. And we also need to be really mindful of kids on a more general scale, that some kids are slipping through the cracks. There's some kids that, particularly when they get to grade 3, the focus shifts, and teachers know this, it shifts from learning to read to actually reading to learn. And so when we're reading to learn, that the expectation there is that we can read. And when kids aren't yet at that point of being able to read to learn or comprehend what they're reading, then they actually get locked out of the curriculum. So that's where accommodations and adjustments need to come in and be implemented. Things like speech to text, things like taking photos of the board to avoid copying down from the board. There's lots of different accommodations and adjustments that we can put into place to make sure that our kids, when they get grade 3 and beyond, are still able to access the curriculum, because it's just so important for them to be able to do that. So
Okay,
I guess
so
that's just a couple of tips. Yeah,
sounds good. So what are the most effective methods for assessing reading and spelling progress in children with dyslexia while considering brain-based learning principles?
yeah. So what we want to do is we want to go in and figure out what their phonological and phonemic awareness is like. Where are the weaknesses in their phonological and phonemic awareness? And then we need to go in and we need to strengthen those weaknesses. So any assessment that will assess their phonological and phonemic awareness, how are they able to segment words in sentences? How are they able to segment sounds in words? How are they able to blend sounds together? Can they manipulate sounds within words? So like you've got the word black and you want to change it, take away the b, and what word is left. So those sorts of phonological and phonemic awareness skills need to be assessed initially to find out where those weaknesses are, where those strengths are, and then bring all of those skills up, because that's the underpinning to our ability to read and spell. And then secondly, a really great assessment tool that I use is called Motif. It's MOTIF. They've got free manual versions online, or you can buy the paid versions that does all of the calculations for you. And that is a really high quality assessment tool. There is a series of assessment tools under that umbrella, and each of those will go in and assess different aspects of the child's literacy development. So we'll go in and have a look at the LEST, which is letter to sound. We'll go in and have a look at the CC2, which is how are kids reading regular words, irregular words, and non-words, et cetera, et cetera. So that is one that I really enjoy using because I know it's high quality. It's also normed on Australian kids as well. So it gives us a really good idea about where kids are sitting compared to their peers.
Okay, so how does working memory limitation impact dyslexic learners, and what strategies can be used to mitigate these challenges during literacy instruction?
Yeah, working memory is a tough one because our kids that are dyslexic or our kids that are having difficulty with reading and spelling, they often have deficits with their working memory. So what that means is that they have a difficulty with holding information in their memory or their auditory memory and then being able to manipulate it to be able to produce something. And so kids with dyslexia have a really hard time holding on to things in their working memory. So what we can do for that is give kids supports. So whether it's someone that is working with the child and they forget a word that they're going to spell, we jump in and we tell them that word so that we're preempting and we're supporting their working memory so they can just focus on their spelling side or the reading side of or whatever they're doing. Another strategy that we've got for working memory is really having things structured for kids as well. So getting them into routines. Working memory is a tough one, but because it's hard to strengthen. It's always going to be something that's a little bit tricky. But when we put into place some strategies to support those kids, like preempting, like supporting them with structures and things like that, we can try to mitigate some of those challenges, but it's obviously going to always be there as a difficulty.
Okay, so what key elements should be included in professional development programs to equip teachers with brain-based strategies for supporting dyslexic students?
Yeah, what key elements should be included in professional development? So what we need to do is get proper training for teachers in their undergrad degrees. So, I mean, it's kind of funny that I spent $20,000 in my undergrad degree becoming a teacher through the Bachelor of Education, but I didn't actually get taught how to teach all kids how to read. So let's start there and let's educate our teachers on how kids need to learn to read according to brain-based principles, as you put it. So I think that, now for the teachers that are in the classroom past their training, we need to teach teachers how kids with dyslexia need to learn how to read in a very structured way. We need to teach them how important letter to sound correspondence is. We need to teach them about phonological and phonemic awareness. Let's teach them about dyslexia too, because that's also something that I didn't learn in my undergrad as well. So I think that there's a lot of education that needs to be put in to teachers so that they have the skills to help the kids that they're with every day.
Okay, so how does early identification and intervention influence the neural development of reading skills in children with dyslexia?
Yeah. So my son, so being a literacy specialist and being a dyslexia specialist, I've got two boys. And my youngest son, he was showing signs of not just kind of like naturally picking up all his reading and spelling stuff. And so I have been working with him like since he was born pretty much on the phonological and phonemic awareness skills and strengthening those parts of his brain that I knew that he would need to be able to read and spell later on. So fast forward to now and he's 10 and I know that he's got all of these dyslexic traits, but he doesn't have any difficulty with reading and spelling because what we did was strengthen his neurological pathways to wire them for that speech to sound connection and that sound to symbol connection. So if he went for a dyslexia diagnosis, he would never, ever get it because he got early intervention. So I think that just really highlights how important early intervention is for kids because we're able to get in before things go wrong. We can go in. So if mum or dad or auntie or anyone in the family struggled with literacy and you are having a child, then there's a really high chance that your child might also struggle with literacy. So get in early with that early intervention and play around with phonological and phonemic awareness. It's fun, kind of game-based stuff that kids absolutely love. So it's a good opportunity for parents to understand that and get in early because it makes a huge difference. We mitigate so many issues that happen later on, particularly around about 8 years old.
Okay, so in what ways can educators, specialists, and families collaborate to design and implement effective neuroscience-informed learning strategies for dyslexia?
In what ways can educators, specialists, how can they collaborate? So, ideally, everyone needs to be on the same page, right? So the teacher needs to be informed about evidence-based practice. So needs to know what kids with dyslexia really require for success. And then if they're working with someone like me, I can also assist the teacher in understanding what that child needs as well. So we can work on advocacy together to educate not only the teacher, if the teacher's not already familiar, but then if there's, of course, OTs or psychs or anything like that in the mix, we're really supporting the child not only on a literacy level, but on a mental health level as well. Because when kids get to, like I said earlier, around about 8 years old, which is about grade 3, they start to look around them and their world isn't so insular anymore. And they start to notice that their ability is different from the kids around them or different from their siblings. And they're having a really hard time still with reading or with spelling, and they're not really getting it. And reading is a really big deal. And so their conclusion all too commonly is that they're dumb. So what we want to do is support them not only with their literacy, but also we need to support kids with their mental health as well and help them understand that it's not that they're dumb, it's just that they haven't been taught the right way yet. So I think that when educators, specialists and families can all come together and be on the same page, the trajectory for that kid is going to be so much better than if they weren't.
Okay. And a final question I'd like to ask everyone here on the Deep Dive podcast. If there's one bit of advice that you would like to give in 30 seconds or less, what would that be?
You put me on the spot here. One bit of advice in 30 seconds. Okay. I know I've already done my 30 seconds, haven't I?
No, that's all good.
I think that it's really important to not wait. Okay, so don't wait. Don't wait to remediate. It's so essential to get in and to get kids help through a structured literacy approach. And if we're waiting, the gap is getting wider and the damage is getting more severe. So without catastrophizing too much, I have seen some really horrible situations when families wait too long. So I would say my best advice is don't wait, get help.
Okay, and on that note, Kristy Haworth, thank you very much for being part of the Deep Dive podcast today.
That's a pleasure, Michael. Good to talk to you.
For more information, go to orchidscan.com.au.